2 years, then I got there 5 years. They said to me before we started, and that's a true story. Before the project started, Celine Dion's son was supposed to follow her footsteps. Everyone expected him to sing. Everyone expected him to stay in music world, but René-Charles had her plans. At 24, he finally spoke the truth about what he's been doing behind closed doors. The family kept it quiet for years. His mother was worried. His late father would have been shocked. But René-Charles didn't care about their fears anymore. What he admitted this year explains why he's been so secretive and why Celine has been so protective of his privacy. Celine Dion was born on March 30, 1968 in a small town called Charlemagne, near Montreal. She was the youngest of 14 children. Their house was so full that her mother joked there wasn't even space for one more spoon. With 16 people under one roof, the noisy and energy never stopped. There was no luxury, no quiet corner, just constant movement and shared everything. Celine was a baby in a world of chaos, one of nearly 20 mouths to feed. Her family lived, like most in their neighborhood, crowded, noisy, and poor. As she laughed, they didn't know they were struggling because everyone around them lived the same way. There wasn't even a crib waiting for her. When she came home from the hospital, her parents placed her in a dresser drawer lined with blankets. It wasn't a quirky decision that it was their only option. There was no money for extras, no room for baby furniture. At the time, the average Canadian family made around $6,000 a year, but the Dons had far less and far more children. Her early life was shaped by limits and hard choices. As she grew, space didn't open up. It only gutted her. Celine had to share a small bed with multiple sisters, sometimes 3 to a mattress. The house was so packed that couches, floors, and even hallways became sleeping spots. She later said girls slept like sardines, crammed together every night. This wasn't just a few years of squeezing in, it lasted through her teenage years. While most Canadian families were shrinking, hers felt like its own crowded village. Her father worked as a butcher, long hours for very little pay. Her mother stayed home, managing the household and sewing clothes from scraps and hand-downs. It was a family powered by survival, not savings. But despite all the hardship, there was always one thing in the air: music. Her father sang, her mother played violin, and even her name came from a song. They named her Celine after a French ballad they loved. Almost like a quiet hope that one day their little girl would carry that song into the world. But even with all that love and music at home, the outside world wasn't kind. In school, Celine was mocked constantly. She was skinny, had big teeth, and didn't look like the other kids. They called her vampire. Tediousing wasn't just once in a while, it was every day. Celine later said bullying left scars she never forgot. She remembered the dread she felt walking into class, knowing exactly what was waiting. Childhood pictures from that time show a quiet girl who seemed unsure of herself. Someone trying to inspire. When she began singing publicly as a teenager, things didn't get easier. Local tabloids mocked her looks and called her Celine Dion because of her teeth. She was only a child, but adult journalists joined in the ridicule. She was getting noticed for her voice, but the headlines were focused on her appearance. By the time she was 18, she'd had enough. She quietly stepped away, got dental caps and braces, and came back ready to be seen for what she could do, not how she looked. School had never been a happy place for her. She once said, very simply, "I detested school." It wasn't just about the bullying. She didn't feel like she belonged there. Her real education came from her home. Her siblings were her teachers. The dinner was her classroom. She learned how to sing, perform, and survive from the people around her, not from books or cookboard. When money was tight, the Dion family didn't give up. They formed a band, literally. All 14 children were part of it. They called themselves Dion's family and performed at local venues across Quebec. Celine was just 5 when she sang in her parents' piano bar. She wasn't treated like a novelty. She was part of the act. By age 12, she had already written her first song and recorded a demo. Her very first public performance was at her brother Michel's wedding in 1973. This wasn't just about fun, it was survival. The shows helped bring in money, and more importantly, they gave Celine a stage. While the schoolyard made her feel small, the family basement made her feel safe. After school, she didn't hang out with friends. She'd run straight home and dive into music with her siblings. Their basement became her refuge. It was loud and alive, filled with instruments and laughter and song. It was in that basement that Celine found her voice. It was where she turned pain into power. Every note she sang was a way to fight back against the word that mocked her. In June 1980, a little girl walked into a local studio with her family. They had saved just enough money to record a demo. It wasn't fancy, just a few simple songs, written, help from her mother and siblings. At that age, most kids were still figuring out how to ride a bike. But this girl had something else on her music. That day, surrounded by her family, she sang into a studio mic and unknowingly took the first step on a path that would eventually reach hundreds of millions. What started in Akachin would one day echo in stadiums across the world. Her mother, tears, didn't just believe in her voice, just staked everything on it. She mortgaged their family home just to send that to Moto, a man named René-Charles. She chose him because he managed Quebec's most famous singer, Jeanette Reno, and Selena looked up to her. But the family only had enough money to send one tape. If it landed in the wrong hands or got tossed in the trash, it would all be over. The Dons had 14 kids. Their father was Abakar. This wasn't just a gamble, it was everything they had, and somehow, that up made it. René listened. He did not just hear a song. He heard something he had never heard before. He later said it was the best voice of his life. Some say he cried. Others say he sat in silence, stunned. What he did next? Secretive. He mortgaged his own house, over $100,000 at the time, to fund her career. A girl with no stage experience, just 12 years old. Friends told him he was out of his mind, but he didn't care. He believed, and by 1983, she was already a rising star in Quebec. By 1988, she had conquered Eurovision. She was just getting started. Their first meeting wasn't staged like a big audition. When the Dion family arrived, René didn't even have a real. He handed her a pencil and said, "Pretend you're singing to a full stadium." She didn't hesitate. She stood there, pencil in hand, and sang secretive, like her life depended on it. René couldn't believe what he was. Later, he said she sang secretive, were 10,000 people in the room. In reality, there were just a few family members and a manager, but that moment sealed her future. Between the ages of 13 and 18, Celine released 9 French-language albums. Most teenagers were worrying about exams or school dances. Celine was recording hit after hit. At 15, she made history in France by becoming the first Canadian artist to receive a gold record there. The song was D'amour ou de tir. At just 18, Celine Dion had a secret she couldn't tell anyone. She had fallen deeply in love with her manager, René-Charles, who was 44 years old. The age gap alone would have been enough to stir gossip, but it went even further than that. She kept a photo of him under her pillow and stared at it every night while sharing a room with her mother. Her obsession made her physically sick. She daydreamed about him. She couldn't sleep. She knew it was impossible. René had already been divorced twice. He was old and ought to be her father. And yet, she couldn't help herself. The more forbidden it felt, the more powerful the feelings grew. No one in her family knew until her mother found out. Celine Dion had always been Celine's biggest supporter. She helped launch her career. She'll believe in her voice. But when she discovered her teenage daughter had fallen for a man nearly 3 decades older, she was horrified. René wasn't just older. He had been in Celine's life since she was 12. TZ saw it as dangerous. She confronted Celine, probably expecting the infatuation to pass. But instead of backing down, Celine stood her ground. She told her mother, "We live in a free country. I can love whoever I want." She wasn't just fighting for her feelings. She was for her independence, and she wasn't going to let anyone stop her. A year later, when she turned 19, everything changed. What had once been a hidden crush became a real relationship. Their first official date happened quietly without any public attention. For years, Celine and René kept their romance secret. Only close friends and family knew. They were careful. They knew people would judge them, but the love between them was real, and they were willing to wait. They hid in plain sight. He was still her manager, still her mentor. But behind the scenes, their bond kept growing stronger. At the peak of her early fame, Celine made a shocking decision. She disappeared from M's spotlight for 18 months. It wasn't a scandal, it was a plan. She capped her teeth, changed her hair, learned fluent English. She didn't want to be a child star anymore. She wanted to be global. The break began in late 1986. And when she returned, she was completely transformed. Her voice hadn't changed, but her image had. And the world noticed. Death. Then came the night that changed her life. On April 30th, 1988, in front of more than 600 million viewers, Celine Dion won the Eurovision Song Contest. She was only 20. That performance was electric. She sang for Switzerland, not Canada, but it didn't matter. When the final votes came in, Switzerland edged past the UK by a single point, 137 to 136. That narrowing made her famous across Europe. The song Ne part pas au becometh, last French-language song to win the contest, and Celine, once a shy teenager from Quebec, was now a continental star. On 1990, she made her biggest leap yet. Her first English-language album, Unison, changed everything. It sold over 1.2 million copies in the United States and went platinum. In Canada, it was certified 7 times platinum. The hit single, Where Does My Heart Beat Now?, reached number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. For a French-speaking artist, that was almost unheard of, but Celine made it look effortless. The album earned her Juno Awards for Album of the Year and Field Vocalist of the Year. She was no longer just a Canadian success. She was breaking into the global pop world, and fast her first major American appearance came that same year on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. After hearing her sing live, Leno looked straight into the camera and predicted she would have an extraordinary career. That moment mattered. No one had said something like that about a new French-Canadian singer before, and yet he turned out to be exactly right. That one TV moment opened doors for her all across the United States. 2 years later, the Wall Street Journal, normalificist on business and finance, called her, oh, once-in-a-generation voice. That kind of praise from such a serious outlet stunned even her team. She was no longer being compared to pop stars, that she was being grouped with legends. Her voice had become her calling card. Strong, pure, and unforgettable. And critics were finally giving her the recognition she deserved. Then came the night of March 30th, 1992. Her 24th birthday, Celine stepped onto the Academy Awards stage to perform Beauty and the Beast with Peabo Bryson. The song had just won an Oscar and a Grammy. She sang it live in front of Hollywood's biggest names, and her performance topped the show. That same night, she launched her next English-language album. The buzz was instant. Within 24 hours, she was back on The Tonight Show. And by then, everyone agreed. Jay Leno's prediction had come true. On December 17, 1994, Celine Dion surprised the entire country by getting married live on national television. Millions across Canada tuned in to watch her walk down the aisle at the Notre Dame Basilica in Montreal. She was just 26, wearing a silk gown with a 20-foot train and a tire so heavy it weighed 7 pounds. Over 500 guests filled the church, which was decorated with more than 10,000 fresh